Echoes of ash, the morning sun dappled through the canopy of ancient oaks, painting the hidden village of Oakhaven in gentle hues of gold and green. It was a place woven into the very fabric of the forest, cottages with moss-laden roofs nestled against gnarled trunks, their smoke curling lazily into the crisp air. 10-year-old Kaelen, with his hair the color of rich earth and eyes that already held a hint of thoughtfulness beyond his years, was helping his mother, Lena, gather herbs from their small, vibrant garden. His father, Theron, a man of quiet strength and quick laughter, was mending a fishing net by the stream, his baritone humming a forgotten tune. Oakhaven was home to those who lived close to the earth, those who understood the subtle magic of growing things and healing arts, a community that valued peace and the old ways. They were outcasts in the eyes of the Holy Order of Lumina, suspected of dark practices for their reverence of nature's cycles, including the quiet acceptance of death as part of life. But here, within the forest's embrace, they felt safe, protected by generations of careful concealment and the belief that their gentle lives posed no threat to anyone. A sudden, sharp cry tore through the morning's tranquility. It was Anya, the village elder, her voice usually a soothing balm, now a shriek of pure terror. Kaelen dropped the basket of moon petal, his heart seizing in his chest. Lena's hand clamped onto his arm, her eyes wide with a fear he had never seen before. Then came the roar, not of a beast but of men. Dozens of them, steel-clad figures, emblazoned with the radiant sun of Lumina, burst from the tree line, their holy symbols gleaming with merciless intent. Their faces were grim, their movements precise, their war cries echoing like a death knell. Purify, for Lumina! Arrows, tipped with glowing blue light, rained down, striking thatched roofs, igniting them instantly. Flames licked skyward, black smoke billowing to choke the air. The shouts of men, the screams of women and children, the frantic neighing of horses, Oakhaven was consumed by chaos. Kaelen! Hide! Lena shoved him towards the root cellar door, her voice raw with desperation. Don't come out no matter what. He stumbled, his small hand instinctively reaching for hers. But she was already turning, her eyes scanning the horror. He saw Theron, net forgotten, sprinting towards them, a crude hunting knife clutched in his hand. He was too far. The cellar door creaked open, revealing a dark, earthy refuge. Kaelen scrambled inside, pulling the heavy wooden door shut, leaving only a sliver of light to pierce the suffocating darkness. He pressed his face against the crack, his breath ragged, heart pounding like a trapped bird. Through the narrow gap he saw them, the purifiers, a relentless tide of steel and righteous fury. They moved with chilling efficiency, cutting down anyone who stood in their path. Old Man Tiber, the village storyteller, fell with a sword through his chest before he could even raise his gnarled staff. Alara, the baker's daughter, no older than Kaelen, was dragged from her home, her cries abruptly silenced. Then he saw him, a towering man in immaculate silver armor, his cape emblazoned with a golden sun. Commander Valerius. His face was a mask of cold resolve, his eyes like chips of ice. He raised a hand, and the massacre intensified. He didn't participate directly in the slaughter, but his presence was a chilling endorsement, a silent command for the brutality to continue. He was the eye of the storm, calm amidst the raging inferno. Kaelen's gaze snapped back to his home. Lena and Theron were cornered by two purifiers. Theron fought with a ferocity Kaelen hadn't known he possessed, protecting Lena with his own body. He managed to wound one, but the other, larger and better armored, brought his mace down with sickening force. Theron crumpled, his head striking the ground with a dull thud. Lena screamed, a sound that would echo in Kaelen's nightmares for years to come. She fell to her knees beside Theron, cradling his head, tears streaming down her face. Kaelen wanted to burst out, to run to them, to save them. But his feet were rooted to the spot, his body frozen by an invisible, paralyzing force. The purifier who had struck Theron raised his mace again, ignoring Lena's pleas. Kaelen watched, helpless, as the heavy weapon descended. He heard the wet, sickening crunch. Lena's body went limp, collapsing onto Theron's. A silent scream tore through Kaelen's throat, unheard, unfelt by anyone but himself. His world had just been ripped apart, his heart shattered into a million pieces. The crack in the cellar door became a window to hell. He saw the purifiers move on, their boots crunching on the path, leaving behind silence and smoke. He stayed there, curled in the musty darkness, until the screams faded, replaced by the crackle of burning wood and the distant shouts of the purifiers as they ensured no life remained. Hours passed. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows through the forest. When the last sounds had died away, when the air was thick with ash and the stench of death, Kaelen finally pushed the cellar door open. He emerged into a landscape of devastation. Oakhaven was gone, reduced to smoldering ruins, charred timbers, and the grotesque stillness of bodies scattered like discarded dolls. He walked through the ashes, his small boots kicking up clouds of gray dust. His home, a mound of glowing embers. The garden trampled and burnt. The stream, red-tinged. He found them, his parents, where he had last seen them. Their forms were still entwined, lifeless. Kaelen knelt, his small hands reaching out, not quite daring to touch them. His eyes, dry and wide with shock, stared at their vacant faces. He felt nothing, yet everything. A profound emptiness, a chilling coldness that seeped into his bones. And then, slowly, something else began to stir. A heat, a burning ember deep within his core. It wasn't grief, not yet. It was something harder, colder, sharper. It was hatred, unadulterated, pure, and searing. Hatred for the men in shining armor, for their radiant sun, for their god who demanded such sacrifice. He saw Valerius's face again in his mind, the unyielding conviction, the cold efficiency. He stayed there until the moon climbed high, casting a pale, indifferent light over the scene of horror. He didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. Instead, he began to dig. With bare hands, he scraped at the earth, pushing aside the ashes, the debris, the broken remnants of his life. He dug a shallow grave for his parents, a final act of love and defiance. When the earth covered them, he stood, a small, solitary figure silhouetted against the burning remnants of his home. His gaze drifted to the distant mountains, where the human cities lay, shining bastions of lumina. A promise formed in his young, broken heart, cold and unyielding as the grave he had just dug. He would remember this day, every scream, every flame, every drop of blood. He would remember Valerius's face, and one day they would remember him. The boy from Oakhaven, buried beneath the echoes of ash. Whispers of the departed, the biting wind was Kaelen's only companion, a relentless hound at his heels. Days had blurred into a tapestry of fear and exhaustion since the Holy Order's torches had painted his world in shades of ash and blood. His legs, raw and bruised, threatened to give out with every step. But the image of Commander Valerius's cold, triumphant eyes, framed by the burning ruins of his home, was a lash that kept him moving. He stumbled through a desolate stretch of land, far from the verdant forests he once knew. Here, the trees were gnarled and skeletal, their branches like grasping claws against a bruised gray sky. The ground was rocky and unforgiving, offering no comfort, no shelter. His stomach ached with a hollow, gnawing pain that had become a constant companion, eclipsing even the sharp sting of the cuts on his arms. He hadn't eaten in what felt like an eternity, his throat raw from thirst. Each breath was a shallow gasp, his lungs burning. Finally, his strength gave way. He pitched forward, landing hard on jagged stones, the impact stealing what little air remained in his chest. Darkness threatened to consume him, a sweet, tempting oblivion. He closed his eyes, seeing his mother's face, his father's strong hands, his sister's bright laughter. All gone. Emptiness. A profound, aching emptiness that threatened to swallow him whole. He lay there for a long time, shivering, the cold seeping into his very bones. When he finally managed to push himself up, a primal instinct to survive overriding the desire to simply cease, the world spun. He crawled, more than walked, dragging his body through the sparse undergrowth. His eyes, sunken and bloodshot, scanned for anything: a berry, a root, a trickle of water. Anything. His gaze snagged on a small, still form nestled amongst a cluster of dead leaves. A field mouse. Its fur, once soft and brown, was matted with a dark stain, its tiny body rigid. It had been dead for a while, perhaps a day or two. Kaelen's first thought was revulsion. Then a flash of desperate hunger. He could clean it, cook it over a fire. But he had no fire. And the thought of tearing into raw flesh, even a mouse, made his gorge rise. He had always been taught to respect life, to honor the fallen, even the smallest creatures. But what was respect when his own life was slipping away? He reached out a trembling hand, driven by a strange, desperate impulse he couldn't name. It wasn't hunger, not entirely. It was a plea. A plea for something to be not dead. A plea against the overwhelming finality that had claimed everything he loved. He didn't know what he was doing, only that his fingers brushed the cold, stiff fur of the mouse. A sudden, sharp jolt shot through him, not unlike a lightning strike. But cold, not hot. It originated from deep within him, a raw, dark surge of energy that felt both alien and terrifyingly familiar. It poured from his fingertips, an invisible current, into the small, dead creature. A low, guttural sound, more of a gasp than a cry, escaped his lips. The mouse twitched. Kaelen recoiled instantly, scrambling backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. He stared, wide-eyed, at the impossible sight. The mouse's tiny head lifted ever so slightly. Its dull, glassy eyes, once vacant, now held a faint, unsettling flicker. It wasn't alive, not truly. There was no warmth, no breath, no beating heart. It was a grotesque marionette, a parody of life. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over Kaelen. This was wrong. This was unnatural. This was dark. The kind of dark magic the Holy Order spoke of, the kind that had justified their brutal purge of his village. He had seen the fear in his neighbor's eyes, the accusations of taint thrown at anyone who spoke of ancient ways. Was he tainted? Had the horror of that night twisted something within him? He wanted to scream, to run, to bury the creature and never look back. But a strange, morbid fascination held him captive. He watched as the mouse's legs scuttled weakly beneath it, dragging its stiff body across the leaves. It moved without purpose, a macabre puppet with invisible strings. Then a whisper, not a sound carried by the wind, but a voice that resonated deep within his mind, ancient and cold, like the chill of a tomb. So, the spark endures. Kaelen gasped, clutching his head. He spun around, searching frantically. But there was no one. Only the desolate landscape, the gnarled trees, and the reanimated mouse. Was he going mad? Was this grief, or hunger, finally breaking his mind? The whisper came again, clearer this time, tinged with a detached, almost amused melancholy. A potent grief. A fertile ground for what lies dormant. He looked back at the mouse, then at his own trembling hands. The cold energy still hummed beneath his skin, a dark echo of the power he had unwittingly unleashed. The terror was still there, a cold knot in his stomach. But something else was stirring now, something dangerous and new. A flicker of understanding, a dawning realization of what this meant. If he could do this, if he could touch death and twist it, his mind replayed the images of his village, the screams, the fires, Valerius's triumphant smirk, the faces of his family, lifeless in the dust. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize in the core of his being, slowly eclipsing the terror. He had been helpless. He had been weak. He had been a victim. But what if this dark, horrifying power was a way to never be a victim again? What if it was a way to reclaim what was taken? He knelt slowly, no longer afraid of the small, shambling corpse. He extended his hand again, this time with a deliberate, albeit trembling, intention. He focused not on fear, but on the raw, burning injustice in his heart. The energy surged once more, colder, stronger. The mouse stopped its aimless scuttling, then, with a slow, deliberate movement, turned its head to look at him, its dead eyes fixed. Kaelen stared back, a grim, dangerous light entering his own eyes. The hunger in his belly was still there, but it was overshadowed by a far deeper, more consuming hunger, a hunger for retribution. The whisper returned, almost approving now. "Yes, child. Let the shadows guide your hand." He picked up the reanimated mouse, its small, stiff body oddly heavy in his palm. It was a gruesome, unsettling thing, yet in its lifeless movement, Kaelen saw not just horror, but possibility, a terrible, forbidden power, born of grief and despair. The Holy Order had taken everything from him, but they had also awakened something within. He was no longer just Kaelen, the boy who had lost everything. He was something else now, something touched by death. And the whispers in his mind were just beginning to show him the way. The first binding the wind, sharp and unforgiving, clawed at Kaelen's threadbare cloak. He shivered not from the cold, but from the raw, gnawing emptiness in his chest. Days blurred into weeks since the pyres of his home had painted the night sky. Now he existed in a desolate valley, a scar on Aetheria's verdant face, far from the Holy Order's gleaming cities. Here only the wind howled a lament, and the soil remembered ancient deaths. He knelt beside a gnarled, skeletal tree, its branches like grasping claws against the bruised twilight sky. At its base lay a small, mummified creature, a field mouse, long dead, its fur brittle, its tiny bones stark beneath the desiccated skin. Kaelen stared at it, his breath misting in the frigid air. The memory of the fire, the screams, the cold, righteous fury in Commander Valerius's eyes, burned behind his own. He needed power. He needed vengeance. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the strange, dark energy that had surged through him in his village's final moments was the key. He extended a trembling hand, focusing. He closed his eyes, drawing deep on the wellspring of grief and rage that had become his constant companion. It wasn't a spell, not yet. It was an instinct, a raw, primal urge to twist the natural order, to defy the finality of death. A faint, sickening warmth spread through his veins, a cold fire that tasted of ash and sorrow. He felt it coalesce, a tendril of shadow stuff, reaching out. When he opened his eyes, the mouse twitched. Kaelen gasped, recoiling. The movement was unnatural, jerky, like a marionette with severed strings. Its tiny, clouded eyes, once dull and vacant, now held a faint, malevolent glow. It lifted its head, a silent, grotesque mockery of life, its mouth opening in a soundless squeak that scraped against Kaelen's mind. A wave of nausea washed over him. This was not life. This was something else, something wrong. He tried to command it, to make it move, to scurry. But the energy was wild, untamed. The mouse merely twitched again, then collapsed, its borrowed spark extinguished as quickly as it had ignited. Kaelen felt a sudden, profound exhaustion, as if every muscle had been stretched to its limit. His head throbbed. He spent the next few days in a feverish haze of experimentation. He found a dead crow, its feathers ruffled and dull. He tried again, channeling his fury, pushing harder. The crow's wing lifted, then fell. Its head rotated on its neck at an impossible angle, a grotesque parody of a living bird. It made a raspy, clicking sound, like bones grinding together. Kaelen felt a thrill of dark fascination mingle with his revulsion. It was hideous, but it was power. He could do this. He had to. He tried to make the crow fly. It flapped its wings erratically, spinning in a tight, uncontrolled circle before crashing to the ground, its body disintegrating into dust and brittle bone. Kaelen slumped against a rock, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead despite the cold. He was pushing himself to the brink, his body aching, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The creatures he roused were unstable, short-lived, and often grotesque. A rabbit, reanimated, twitched uncontrollably, its legs moving in opposite directions before it tore itself apart. A lizard, its scales flaking, gnawed at its own tail before its borrowed animation winked out. Each failure was a reminder of his crude understanding, his lack of control. He was merely prodding at the veil of death, not truly commanding it. One evening, under a sliver of moon, Kaelen sat amidst the scattered remains of his failed experiments. The air tasted of decay and spent magic. He looked at his hands, seeing not the tools of a nascent master, but the instruments of a child fumbling with a dangerous artifact. He was a brute wielding a power he didn't comprehend. He could feel the vastness of this magic, the potential within it. But he was chipping away at a mountain with a dull spoon. The faces of his family flashed before him, his mother's gentle smile, his father's strong hands, his sister's bright eyes, Valerius's sneer. The images solidified his resolve, hardening the edges of his grief into something cold and sharp. He needed more. He needed knowledge. This raw, untamed power would not be enough to carve out his vengeance. He needed to understand the how, the why, the way to truly bind death to his will. He stood, the exhaustion a dull ache in his bones, but a new clarity in his mind. He wasn't just a boy with a talent for dark magic. He was a student, desperately needing a teacher. But where could he find such knowledge? The Holy Order burned any text, any whisper of necromancy. As if in answer, a faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated from a moss-covered mound nearby, half swallowed by the earth. Curiosity, stronger than his weariness, pulled him towards it. It was an ancient, forgotten burial site, marked by crumbling stones and a single petrified oak. He pushed aside thick brambles, revealing a narrow crevice. A faint, cold light, not of fire or sun, pulsed from within. He squeezed through the opening, the air growing heavy, thick with the scent of forgotten dust and ancient magic. The passage opened into a small, circular chamber, its walls adorned with faded carvings of skeletal figures and arcane symbols he didn't understand. In the center, resting on a crumbling pedestal, was a single obsidian-bound tome. Its pages, though ancient, seemed untouched by decay. As Kaelen reached for it, a whisper, cold and dry as forgotten bone, slithered into his mind. "You seek to bind death, child? You merely poke its sleeping eye." Kaelen froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He spun around, but the chamber was empty. Yet the voice lingered, a spectral echo. "Raw grief is a powerful catalyst, yes. But true mastery requires more than sorrow and vengeance. It requires understanding, discipline, and a guide." A faint, ethereal shimmer coalesced in the corner of the chamber, barely visible, like heat haze over a distant desert. It formed into the translucent outline of a woman, tall and gaunt, her eyes ancient pools of shadow. Her lips did not move, but the voice, now clearer, resonated directly in his mind. "You have taken the first step, young one. The first binding is crude, yes, but it is a start. But to truly shape the shadows, you will need more than instinct. You will need a mentor. And I have been waiting." Kaelen stared, terror and a desperate hope warring within him. He was not alone. The path to vengeance, he realized, was far longer, and far more shadowed than he had ever imagined. And perhaps he was about to learn far more complicated. Anya's awakening the air was a shroud of frigid dampness, clinging to Kaelen's tattered cloak like a dying breath. Each step through the choked, thorny brambles of the whisperwood felt like another nail in his coffin. His small frame trembling not just from the cold, but from the raw, unceasing ache in his chest. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the fire. Since the screams. since Valerius's gleaming sword had cut through the heart of everything he knew. The memories were not distant echoes, but fresh wounds, bleeding anew with every rustle of leaves, every imagined crackle of flame. He stumbled, falling to his knees in a patch of slick moss. His stomach growled, a hollow, pathetic sound that mocked his dwindling strength. He hadn't eaten anything substantial in days, surviving on foraged berries and the occasional root. His hands, once soft with a child's innocence, were now calloused and scraped, stained with grime and the remnants of tears he refused to shed. He wouldn't cry. Crying was for the weak, for the dead. He was neither. Not yet. Above him, the ancient trees of Whisperwood twisted into grotesque silhouettes against a bruised, twilight sky. This was a place whispered about in hushed tones, a land where the forest grew too thick, the shadows too deep, and the air hummed with something ancient and forgotten. It was the last place the Lumina purifiers would look, and thus the only place he could go. A faint, almost imperceptible chill, colder than the forest air, brushed against his skin. It wasn't the wind. It was a sensation, a subtle pull deep within him, a silent whisper in the core of his being, drawing him deeper into the tangled growth. He pushed himself up, his eyes, once wide and innocent, now narrowed with a grim determination. There was nothing left to lose. He followed the pull, pushing through curtains of ivy and thorny vines that tore at his clothes and skin. The ground beneath his feet grew uneven, hinting at hidden undulations. Soon, the trees thinned, revealing a sheer cliff face, scarred and pitted by millennia of wind and rain. At its base, half hidden by a cascade of crumbling rock and overgrown foliage, was a dark, gaping maw, the entrance to a crypt or cave, perhaps. It felt less like an opening and more like a wound in the earth. Hesitantly, Kaelen approached, his hand instinctively reaching for the small, dull hunting knife he'd salvaged from his ruined home. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and old, like forgotten blood. He stepped inside, and the world outside vanished, replaced by an absolute, crushing darkness. Panic threatened to seize him, but he fought it down. Panic leads to death, a voice that sounded chillingly like his father's, but warped by memory, echoed in his mind. He shuffled forward, one hand tracing the rough, cold stone wall. The passage narrowed, then opened into a vast chamber. A faint, ethereal glow emanated from somewhere within, a soft, pulsating blue light that barely pierced the gloom. He moved towards it, his heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The chamber was immense, supported by colossal pillars carved with eroded, unidentifiable symbols. Broken sarcophagi lay scattered, their lids askew, revealing only dust and the gnawing maw of time. This wasn't just a cave. It was an ancient necropolis, forgotten by living memory. The blue light pulsed from a small alcove at the far end of the chamber. As Kaelen drew closer, he saw it. A pedestal, carved from dark, veined stone, upon which rested a single artifact. It was a staff, gnarled and twisted like ancient roots, topped with a sphere of polished obsidian. Within the obsidian, the faint blue light pulsed, a captive star. The staff radiated an undeniable power, a hum that resonated deep in Kaelen's bones, a strange, morbid comfort. He reached out, his fingers trembling, hovering just above the obsidian sphere. Felt cold yet alive. A sudden, sharp jolt of energy shot through him the moment his fingertips brushed the polished surface. The blue light flared, blinding him, and a guttural, ancient groan rumbled through the crypt, rattling his teeth. The air around him shimmered, coalescing into a translucent, humanoid form. It was a woman, tall and slender, her features sharp and elegant, though tinged with an ethereal, almost skeletal quality. Her eyes, pools of deep shadow, fixed on Kaelen with an unsettling intensity. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from mist and starlight, and her presence made the cold in the crypt feel like a living thing. Well, well, a voice, dry as ancient parchment yet sharp as a blade, echoed not in his ears, and directly in his mind. What have we here? A little mouse, lost in the catacombs of the dead. Kaelen stumbled back, tripping over a loose stone. He landed hard, scrambling to put distance between himself and the spectral figure. His knife, clutched tight, felt utterly useless. The spectral woman observed him, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of her lips suggesting amusement. Fear not, child. I am not another Lumina dog come to purify you. Her gaze drifted over his ragged clothes, his haunted eyes, the faint but undeniable aura of grief and nascent power that clung to him. Though, by the looks of it, you've already been through their tender mercies. Who are you? Kaelen stammered, his voice hoarse. Anya, she replied, her spectral form wavering slightly, as if she were a ripple in a dark pool. Or what remains of her. And you, little mouse, are quite the anomaly. A flicker of something I haven't seen in centuries. Her shadowy eyes narrowed, studying him with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. Grief. So much grief. And beneath it, a tiny, burning ember of hatred. Kaelen flinched. He had tried so hard to hide it, to bury it beneath the terror and the hunger. But Anya saw it laid bare. Don't look so surprised, Anya continued, a hint of genuine interest replacing her initial amusement. I've seen it countless times. It's a potent fuel that, a dangerous one, if not properly channeled. Or perhaps, because it is properly channeled. She glided closer, her feet making no sound on the stone floor. Kaelen instinctively tried to retreat further. But his back was against a crumbling pillar. You reek of stolen life, boy, of a village burned, of innocence slaughtered. I recognize the scent. It's the same perfume that has stained this land for generations. They killed everyone, Kaelen choked out, the words tearing at his throat. My family, my mother, they called us dark. Anya hummed, a low, resonant sound that vibrated through the chamber. Darkness is often merely misunderstood light, twisted by fear and ignorance. They call us dark. They call you dark. Tell me, boy, what do you call them? Kaelen's gaze hardened, the raw grief giving way to a cold, unwavering fury. Monsters, he whispered, the word laced with venom. They are the monsters. Anya's spectral form seemed to brighten, a subtle shift in her ethereal glow. Ah, there it is. The echo. The beginning of a path I know well. She gestured to the obsidian staff on the pedestal. That staff, it is a conduit, a key, and it chose you whether you know it or not. Or perhaps you chose it by simply existing here in this state. She moved past him, circling the pedestal. You possess a latent gift, child. A connection to the veil between life and death that few are born with. The trauma you've endured has ripped that veil for you, for better or worse. You have touched the raw energy of loss. And it has awakened something within you. Something they would call an abomination. Something I call potential. Kaelen looked from the staff to Anya, confusion warring with a desperate, nascent hope. Potential for what? Anya turned, her shadowy eyes meeting his once more. This time, there was no amusement, only a profound, ancient knowing. Potential to understand, to wield, to reclaim. Or, if you are not careful, potential to become exactly what you despise. Her gaze lingered on his small, desperate face. If for a fleeting moment, a hint of something akin to pity. If perhaps a long-buried empathy softened her spectral features. You are alone, aren't you? Hunted, grieving, and burning with a desire for something you don't yet fully comprehend. He nodded, unable to speak, the truth of her words a physical weight. Good, Anya said, her voice regaining its dry, pragmatic edge. Loneliness is an excellent teacher. Grief a powerful motivator. And a burning desire for justice. Or vengeance. Or you perceive it now can move mountains. or raise armies. She paused, her gaze returning to the obsidian staff. I am bound to this place, to this artifact, until a worthy successor reawakens me, until the cycle of ignorance and slaughter can perhaps be broken, or at least balanced. She looked back at Kaelen, a flicker of renewed purpose in her ancient eyes. You wish to understand what happened? To know why? And perhaps to make them pay? Kaelen's jaw tightened. Yes. The word was a vow, a burning oath forged in the crucible of his pain. Anya gave a slow, spectral nod. Then we have much to discuss, child. Much to learn. And much to unleash. The world of Aetheria believes it has banished the shadows. It is time for them to remember that shadows always return, especially when fed by blood and injustice. She extended a translucent hand towards the staff. Take it, Kaelen. Your journey, and ours, begins now. With a trembling hand, Kaelen reached for the staff. As his fingers closed around the gnarled wood, the obsidian sphere pulsed with a fierce, brilliant blue light, illuminating the ancient crypt, and casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to coil and writhe around him, like nascent guardians. The cold, once oppressive, now felt like a living energy, flowing into him, awakening something deep within his very soul. The world, once a place of terror and despair, now held a terrifying new purpose. Lessons in shadow. The air in the forgotten crypt was thick with the scent of damp earth and ages of undisturbed dust. Stone pillars, etched with symbols Kaelen couldn't yet decipher, stretched into the gloom, supporting a ceiling lost to shadow. Here, amidst the bones of forgotten kings and the whisper of ancient magic, Anya's spectral form shimmered, her eyes, like twin points of cold starlight, fixed on Kaelen. Grief is a dull blade, boy. Anya's voice resonated, not from a physical throat, but from the very air around him, a chilling echo of a distant past. It cuts, yes, but without direction it only mangles the wielder. We will forge it into a weapon. Kaelen stood before her, his young face hardened by recent trauma, jaw set in a grim line. The tattered remnants of his old life clung to him like a shroud. But beneath them, a nascent resolve pulsed. He nodded, his hands clenching at his sides. He had seen enough death. Now he would wield it. Your first lesson, Anya continued, drifting closer until her translucent form seemed to press against his mind, is to feel, not with your heart, for that is a weakness, but with your essence. The world is not merely rock and tree. It is a tapestry woven of life and death, an endless cycle of energies. You must learn to distinguish the threads. She gestured towards a pile of small, desiccated animal bones in the corner, a collection of rodents and birds, long since deceased. Sense the residue, the echo of life, the silence of death. Find the spark that once animated them. And then, compel it. Kaelen knelt, his fingers trembling as he reached for a tiny bird skull. He closed his eyes, trying to clear his mind. But the image of his mother's lifeless eyes flashed before him, a fresh wound. A wave of nausea, half grief, half revulsion, swept over him. This was the magic that had been deemed an abomination, the power that had cost him everything. Could he truly embrace it? Hesitation is death. Anya's voice cut through his internal struggle. Your enemies will not grant you pause. Channel your hatred for them. Let it burn away your squeamishness. He focused on the anger, a cold, hard knot in his gut. The faces of the Lumina purifiers, their righteous fury as they burned his home, his family. They had forced this upon him. They had made him what he was becoming. He tried again, reaching out with his mind, pushing. He felt nothing, only the cold, inert bone. He gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. You push too hard, like a brute attempting to force a lock, Anya observed, her spectral finger tracing patterns in the air. Necromancy is not about brute force, Kaelen. It is about understanding the currents, about whispering to the veil between worlds. It is about convincing the energy that remains to heed your will. Days bled into weeks. Kaelen's hands grew calloused, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. He practiced in the crypt. Then in a forgotten grotto where ancient roots writhed like petrified snakes. Then eventually in a desolate, rock-strewn valley, far from any human gaze. He learned to sense the lingering vital energy in a fallen leaf, the faint spark of memory in a sun-bleached skull, the raw, potent sorrow emanating from a barren patch of earth where life had withered. His first success was agonizingly slow. A single, brittle finger bone of a long-dead rat twitched, then fell still. He gasped, a mixture of triumph and horror. The effort had drained him, leaving him shaking and lightheaded. Anya merely watched, her lips thin. "Better," she acknowledged. "But you merely tickled the surface. Now we delve deeper. For true power, you must understand the language." She led him to a hidden chamber within the crypt, shelves upon shelves of crumbling scrolls and leather-bound tomes. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced cracks in the ceiling. The air here hummed with a different kind of energy, the weight of forgotten knowledge. "These are the texts of the ancients," Anya explained, her spectral hand sweeping over a particularly thick, iron-bound book. "They contain the rituals, the incantations, the very philosophy of those who walked this path before the Holy Order sought to erase them. You will read them. You will understand them. You will live them." Kaelen spent hours poring over the brittle pages, deciphering archaic script, learning symbols that pulsed with hidden meaning. He read of the delicate balance between life and death, how one fed the other, how true necromancy wasn't about defying nature, but about understanding its deepest, most forbidden currents. He learned that the energy of death was not inherently evil, but a primal force neutral until wielded by intent. He read of rituals to draw energy from the earth, from sorrow, from the very essence of decay. He stumbled across passages that spoke of the spirit weave, a concept describing the interconnectedness of all living things, and how death merely untangled one thread, releasing its energy back into the greater tapestry. It was a stark contrast to the Holy Order's teachings of absolute good and evil, light and shadow. Here, everything was interwoven. "The Holy Order preaches purity," Anya's voice would interject, sensing his thoughts. "They seek to sever the threads they do not understand, to burn what they fear. But you, Kaelen, will learn to mend and reweave." The intellectual strain was as grueling as the physical. He had nightmares of spectral symbols swirling around him, of ancient voices whispering in his ears. He was often dizzy from the sheer volume of information, his mind a battlefield of new knowledge clashing with ingrained prejudice. "Your greatest strength, Kaelen," Anya declared one morning, after he had successfully animated a skeletal hand to grasp a specific herb from a thorny bush, "is not the power you wield. After the will that drives it. You are fueled by grief, by injustice. This is potent, but it can also consume you." She then introduced him to the most harrowing lesson yet, the channeling of raw sorrow. Deep within a desolate cave, where the air was cold and still, Anya commanded him to meditate. "Recall it," she urged, her voice softer than usual, where no less firm. "The fire, the screams, the faces of your family. Do not push it away. Embrace it. Let it wash over you. But then, Kaelen, control it. Do not be its victim. Be its master." Kaelen resisted at first. He had tried so hard to bury those memories, to numb the pain. But Anya was relentless. She conjured faint, fleeting images of his village in flames, of the purifier's relentless march. The agony was fresh, visceral. He tasted ash, smelled burning flesh. Tears streamed down his face, hot and furious. His body shook uncontrollably. "Good," Anya murmured, a strange note in her voice that almost sounded like approval. "Now capture it. Draw it in. Feel its weight, its density. It is not just sadness, Kaelen. It is energy. The energy of a life cut short, of a future denied. It is the fuel for your vengeance." He screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore from his throat. The grief, the rage, the profound sense of loss, he gathered it, not pushing it away, but drawing it deep into his core. It felt like a freezing fire, searing and numbing simultaneously. A dark, vibrant energy pulsed within him, thrumming like a discordant chord. With a silent command from Anya, he extended his hand towards a skeletal wolf, its bones scattered across the cave floor. This was no small bird. This was a creature of power, even in death. He poured his channeled sorrow into it, not with a whisper, but a roar of his will. The bones rattled. Dust flew. A low, mournful groan echoed through the cave as the individual vertebrae, ribs, and femurs slowly, painstakingly, began to knit themselves together. First the spine, then the ribcage, the long bones of the legs. Kaelen's eyes were wide, his face streaked with tears and dirt, but a fierce light flickered within them. He felt the drain, a profound emptiness beginning to bloom in his chest. But he pushed through it, fueled by the sheer, unadulterated need. The skeletal wolf stood, its empty eye sockets fixed on Kaelen. It was gaunt, silent, a grotesque mockery of life. But it stood. It moved its head, a silent acknowledgement. Kaelen gasped for breath, his vision blurring, his body aching as if he'd run 100 miles. He slumped to the ground, utterly spent. But a small, grim smile touched his lips. Anya shimmered before him, her spectral form more solid than usual, perhaps a reflection of the powerful magic that had just been unleashed. Her starlight eyes held a flicker of something ancient and knowing. "You have taken the first true step, Kaelen," she said, her voice softer now, almost a sigh. "You have learned to transform despair into defiance. But this is merely the beginning. The path you walk is long, fraught with peril, and stained with shadows. You have touched the raw power of death. And it will change you. It will demand much. Are you prepared to pay the price?" Kaelen, exhausted but resolute, looked at the skeletal wolf, then back at Anya. "I am prepared," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "to pay any price to see them burn." The crypt fell silent, save for the faint, rhythmic click of the skeletal wolf's jaw, a silent sentinel in the burgeoning shadow. Guardian of the crypts, the air in the forgotten crypt hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient dust. Kaelen, a gaunt figure barely out of boyhood, stood amidst a scattered collection of bones, his breath misting in the frigid gloom. Around him, 3 skeletal warriors, crudely assembled but animated with a nascent spark of necromantic power, shuffled and clicked, their empty eye sockets fixed on him. Each movement was a testament to his grueling, solitary training. He extended a hand, fingers splayed, and a faint, sickly green aura pulsed from his palm. One of the skeletons, its ribcage cracked and yellowed, lurched forward, its bony arm reaching out. Kaelen focused, sweat beading on his brow, willing the skeletal hand to close into a fist. Trembled, then slowly, agonizingly complied. "Good." A voice echoed in his mind, ancient and dry as parchment. "Control the small things. Then the large will follow. Though I've seen better form from a novice school." Anya, a shimmering, translucent figure, materialized beside him, her spectral form casting no shadow. Her eyes, pools of deep shadow, surveyed his efforts with a critical gaze. "They are crude," Kaelen acknowledged, his voice a low rasp, "but they obey." "Obedience is the first lesson of the grave," Anya mused, circling the skeletal warrior. "But obedience without purpose is merely a dance for the worms. You must imbue them with your will, not merely command their parts." Kaelen nodded, his jaw tight. Every bone, every flicker of arcane energy, was a step towards his goal. His family, his village, reduced to ash and memory by the holy order of Lumina. The images were a constant, burning ember behind his eyes, fueling his every waking moment. Suddenly, a jolt, like a cold hand seizing his heart, shot through him. He froze, his head snapping up. The green aura around his hand flickered and died. "What is it?" Anya's voice sharpened, her spectral form subtly shifting, becoming more defined. Intruders, Kaelen whispered, his eyes narrowing. He didn't need to see them. He felt their presence, a discordant vibration against the ancient stillness of the crypt. Living warmth, alien and unwelcome. He moved with a predatory grace, melting into the deeper shadows of the crypt, Anya floating silently beside him. He navigated twisting passages and crumbling staircases until he reached a vantage point overlooking the main entrance tunnel, a natural choke point. Below, 3 figures advanced cautiously. Their polished steel breastplates glinted faintly, emblazoned with the radiant sunburst sigil of Lumina. Human purifiers. Kaelen's grip tightened on the rough-hewn staff he now carried, tipped with a shard of obsidian. "Are you certain, Brother Jorik?" One of them, a younger man, asked, his voice echoing nervously. "This whole valley feels wrong. Even the trees seem to lean away from it." "Silence, initiate," snapped the lead scout, a grizzled veteran with a scarred face. "Commander Valerius himself ordered us to sweep this sector. Reports of strange phenomena, whispers of old magic. We can't leave any stone unturned." Kaelen felt a cold spike of recognition at the name Valerius, the architect of his ruin, the general who had overseen the purification of his home. His heart pounded with a grim, satisfying rhythm. Valerius, Anya's voice was a low hum in his mind. The fanatic. He burns brighter than most. But even the brightest fires consume themselves eventually. Kaelen ignored her, his gaze locked on the scouts. He studied their formation, their wary movements, their swords drawn but held loosely. Arrogance, he noted. They expected no real resistance, only perhaps a frightened beast or a minor dark practitioner. They did not expect him. He began to formulate a plan, tracing mental lines in the dust, mapping out an ambush. He would use the crypt itself as a weapon. "They are too exposed," Kaelen murmured to Anya, "and too confident." "A common failing of those who believe themselves blessed by the light," Anya agreed. "Their faith blinds them to the shadows at their feet." Kaelen retreated slightly, signaling his skeletal warriors to positions he'd chosen carefully, behind crumbling pillars, within alcoves, ready to burst forth. He channeled a sliver of his nascent power into the crypt's very structure, feeling the ancient stone hum in response. He would not just unleash his undead. He would make the crypt itself an enemy. The scouts pressed on, their footsteps crunching on loose scree. The lead scout, Jorik, paused, sniffing the air. "I smell something foul, like churned earth and old blood." "Stay alert," the youngest scout whispered, his eyes wide. Before Jorik could respond, Kaelen struck. With a silent command, the entrance tunnel behind them shuddered. A cascade of loose stones and dirt rained down, not enough to collapse it, but enough to block their retreat and disorient them. "Ambush!" Jorik roared, raising his shield. From the shadows, Kaelen's 3 skeletal warriors burst forth. They were slow, clumsy, but relentless. Their bone claws scraped against armor, their empty eye sockets fixed on the living. The scouts, momentarily stunned by the falling debris, reacted with shouts of alarm and the clang of steel. Kaelen remained hidden, a puppet master in the gloom. He didn't engage directly. Instead, he wove minor spells not for direct harm, but to manipulate. Shadows deepened around the scouts, making their movements uncertain. Ancient dust billowed up, stinging their eyes. He focused on the very ground beneath them, causing small cracks to appear, loose rocks to shift and trip them. The fight was brutal, if short. The scouts were trained. But their training was for open combat against clear foes, not for a claustrophobic ambush in a crumbling tomb orchestrated by an unseen enemy. Jorik, the veteran, cleaved one skeleton in half with a powerful swing, its bones scattering. But another immediately took its place, its bony fingers scrabbling at his helmet. The youngest scout, overwhelmed by terror, stumbled backward into a wall Kaelen had subtly weakened. Loose stones dislodged, burying him up to his waist, leaving him thrashing, vulnerable. The third scout, trying to aid him, was brought down by a precise, almost surgical, burst of shadow magic from Kaelen that shattered his knee. Now only Jorik remained, his breathing ragged, his armor dented, facing the two remaining skeletons and the unseen horror. He spun, searching for Kaelen, his eyes wild. "Show yourself, necromancer!" he bellowed, his voice filled with a desperate rage. "Face the light of Lumina!" Kaelen stepped out of the shadows, his face cold and impassive, illuminated by the faint, sickly green glow that now emanated from his staff. His eyes, once full of boyish innocence, were now deep pools of shadowed resolve. "The light of Lumina," Kaelen said, his voice quiet, devoid of emotion, "burns away more than just shadow." He raised his staff. Jorik charged, a desperate cry on his lips. But Kaelen was faster. A tendril of shadow lashed out, wrapping around Jorik's sword arm, freezing it mid-swing. Then, with a silent command, the skeletal warriors closed in. One struck his shield, jarring him, while the other, with surprising force, plunged its jagged bone hand into the gap beneath his armpit, severing a vital artery. Jorik gasped, a wet gurgle, his eyes wide with disbelief and pain. He fell, his lifeblood quickly staining the ancient stone. Silence descended, broken only by the drip of water from a hidden spring. Kaelen stood amidst the fallen humans and his now motionless skeletal forces. The green glow around his staff faded. He felt no elation, no joy, only a grim, cold satisfaction. This was not vengeance, not yet. It was merely a step. Anya materialized fully, her form solidifying slightly. "A clean kill," she observed, her voice devoid of praise or judgment. "Efficient. You used the terrain, their arrogance, and your own limited resources wisely." Kaelen surveyed the scene. The bodies of the purifiers, the scattered bones of his own constructs, the lingering scent of fear and death. He walked over to Jorik's body, his gaze lingering on the luminous sigil. The same sigil that had adorned the banners of those who had raised his home. He knelt, his movements deliberate. He stripped the dead of their weapons, their supplies, their maps, and their holy order insignia. These were not trophies, but tools. Each item was a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the enemy he sought to dismantle. One of the maps, unfurled by the dim light of a flickering arcane orb Kaelen conjured, showed the sprawling territories of the human kingdoms, crisscrossed with patrol routes and marked with outposts. The sheer scale of it was daunting. "They are many," Anya's voice was a whisper in his mind, "and they are entrenched." This was a skirmish, Kaelen. Do not mistake it for a battle one. Kaelen looked at the map, then at the stolen Lumina sigil clutched in his hand. His face was grim, unyielding. The grief was still a raw wound, but now it was tempered by a chilling resolve. The first taste of victory had not sated his hunger for revenge. It had only sharpened it. He would master his power. He would raise an army. He would make them pay. He folded the map carefully, tucking it into his worn leather satchel. He had found his path, and the shadows of Aetheria would soon know his name. Anya watched him, her ancient eyes holding a flicker of something akin to approval, perhaps even hope. As Kaelen turned back towards the deeper, darker reaches of the crypt, ready to continue his work. Forging the horde, the biting wind of the gray wastes gnawed at Kaelen's exposed skin. But he barely registered the chill. His concentration was absolute, a fragile thread stretched taut between his will and the scattered remains of a lone, ancient skeleton. He knelt in the desolate expanse, a wasteland scarred by forgotten skirmishes, where dust motes danced in the perpetual twilight. Before him a human femur twitched, then vibrated, a faint, sickly green aura flickering around it. "Focus, Kaelen," Anya's spectral voice whispered, a dry rustle like leaves scuttling across stone. Her translucent form shimmered beside him, her eyes, ancient pools of shadow, fixed on his straining face. You merely nudge the remnants of life. You must command the essence of death itself. Kaelen gritted his teeth, a tremor running through his hand. The femur shuddered again, rising a mere inch off the ground before clattering back down, a hollow sound that echoed his frustration. He was tired, perpetually so. His grief a heavy cloak he could not shed, even as it fueled his every effort. He had animated small bones, a rodent skull, a severed hand. But these were crude, mindless puppets. He needed more. He needed soldiers. It lacks purpose, he muttered, his voice raw. It lacks will. Will is yours to bestow, Anya corrected, her tone devoid of sympathy, yet laced with an undeniable wisdom. These are not living beings you are coercing. They are husks, waiting for an imprint. Your grief is a wellspring, Kaelen. But it must be channeled, not merely felt. It must become the binding oath that resurrects them. She gestured towards the cracked earth, where countless other bones lay half-buried. This paltry collection is insufficient. To forge an army, you must seek ground rich with the legacy of conflict. A place where many fell, their spirits lingering, their purpose unfulfilled. Days later, guided by Anya's ethereal hand, Kaelen found such a place. It was a valley, shrouded in perpetual mist, known only in hushed whispers as the Valley of Silent Swords. Legend claimed a forgotten kingdom had made its last stand here, centuries ago, against an encroaching blight. The air hummed with a somber energy, a lingering echo of despair and defiance. Broken blades, rusted armor fragments, and countless bones lay scattered amidst gnarled, skeletal trees. Kaelen walked amongst the silent dead, his boots crunching on ancient femurs and ribs. The sheer scale of the devastation was sobering. He knelt by a particularly dense cluster of remains, a fallen warrior whose skull still bore the imprint of a fatal blow. He felt a strange pang, not of pity, but of connection. This warrior, like his own family, had met a violent end. These are ripe, Anya observed, her form solidifying slightly in the dense magical atmosphere. Their deaths were not peaceful. Their will, though long dormant, resonates with a hunger for resolution. Feel it, Kaelen. Touch the sorrow, the anger, the unfinished business that binds them to this earth. Kaelen closed his eyes, extending his senses. He felt it, a vast, cold ocean of sorrow, a faint hum of forgotten rage. He thought of his village, the screams, the fires, Valerius's chilling decree. His own grief, a raw wound, resonated with the ancient echoes. Now reach, Anya commanded. Draw the essence not from the bones alone, but from the spiritual residue clinging to this place. Weave your grief, your purpose into that despair. Give them a reason to rise again, a reason you command. Kaelen took a deep breath, the cold air burning his lungs. He extended his hands over the bones, his fingers tingling with nascent power. He began to chant, the words ancient and guttural, learned from Anya's whispered lessons. His voice, usually quiet, deepened, taking on an unnatural resonance. Green energy, sickly yet potent, began to coalesce around his palms, snaking down towards the earth. He felt a pull, a resistance, then a sudden, violent surge. The ground trembled. Dust and bone fragments danced in the air. A low moan, like wind through a tomb, echoed through the valley. Kaelen felt a tremendous drain on his own life force, a dizzying emptiness that threatened to consume him. He pushed through it, his vision blurring, his resolve burning brighter than ever. For them, for my family, for revenge. Slowly, agonizingly, a skeletal hand burst from the earth, followed by an arm. Then a ribcage. Bone by bone, sinew of shadow and necrotic energy, a warrior began to reassemble itself. It was grotesque, yet magnificent in its silent resurgence. The bones clicked and ground, reforming into a vaguely humanoid shape. A skull, eyeless and hollow, turned towards Kaelen, an unspoken question in its vacant gaze. Kaelen met its gaze, his own eyes burning with an unholy light. "You are mine," he whispered, his voice hoarse but firm. "You will serve my will. You will be my shield, my blade, my vengeance." The skeletal warrior stood, a silent sentinel, its form complete. It was crude, missing a few phalanges, its posture stiff. But it was there. It radiated an aura of cold, unwavering obedience. Kaelen felt a surge of triumph, cold and exhilarating, wash over him. But beneath it, a sliver of unease. He had given it life of a sort. But at what cost to his own soul? Anya watched, a faint, approving hum emanating from her. Good. The first step on a long, dark road. Understand this, Kaelen. They are loyal. But they are also a reflection of your will. Should your will falter, so too will their purpose. They are an extension of your grief, a physical manifestation of your hatred. Wield them wisely. Kaelen barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on the skeletal warrior. Then swept across the vast, bone-littered valley. A new purpose, sharp and cold, settled deep within him. He had found his tools. He had found his army's genesis. He began again, the chant flowing more easily this time, the green light brighter, more focused. He pulled at the echoes of death, shaping them, binding them, one by one. Then two by two, the skeletal warriors rose from the earth, their numbers slowly growing. Silent, unfeeling, and utterly loyal, they were Kaelen's first true horde, a grim testament to his burgeoning power and his unyielding quest for retribution. The Valley of Silent Swords had found its new master, and Aetheria would soon feel the shadow of its awakening. The oath of bones, the wind, a mournful whisper through the skeletal branches of the blighted woods, carried the faint, metallic scent of human zeal. Kaelen, cloaked in shadow, stood atop a low rise, his breath a faint mist in the chill air. Below, the ancient, gnarled roots of petrified trees snaked across the desolate ground, perfect cover for his growing legion. His gaze, sharp and cold, tracked the approaching column. 25 men, perhaps 30, clad in the polished steel and white tabards of the Holy Order of Lumina. Their captain, a burly man with a crucifix emblem emblazoned on his shield, marched at the head, his torch casting dancing shadows that swallowed the fading light. They were too many for Kaelen to face alone, even with his burgeoning power. But he was no longer alone. Anya's spectral form shimmered beside him, her ancient eyes fixed on the approaching purifiers. They seek to root out any darkness in these lands. Her voice, a dry rustle of forgotten leaves, echoed in Kaelen's mind. A futile endeavor. As always, the shadow precedes the light, and often outlasts it. Kaelen said nothing, his focus absolute. Grief was a dull ache now, replaced by a searing clarity. He remembered the screams, the fire, Valerius's sneering face. This wasn't just a battle. It was a declaration. "Are you ready, boy?" Anya prompted, a hint of something unreadable in her tone. "To truly embrace the path you have chosen? There is no turning back from this." Kaelen's jaw tightened. Ready. He descended into the gloom, a figure barely visible against the encroaching night. He moved through the ranks of his creations. A dozen skeletal warriors, their bone-white forms chillingly silent, their rusted blades clutched in bony hands. 3 shambling corpses, their flesh mottled and torn, animated by the crude stitches of his will. And, most unsettling, a pair of wraiths, their ethereal forms wailing softly, ready to sow panic. It was a meager host by the standards of ancient necromancers. But for a boy barely past his youth, it was a terrifying testament to his resolve. The purifiers, their torches held high, moved cautiously through the gnarled landscape. "Keep your eyes sharp," the captain barked, his voice echoing too loudly in the oppressive quiet. "This land is steeped in old evils. Lumina's light shall cleanse it." As the first purifiers stepped into the killing zone, Kaelen raised his hand. A cold wave of energy rippled outwards from him. From beneath the cracked earth, From behind the twisted roots, the undead rose. The skeletal warriors burst forth, their movements jerky but relentless, blades glinting in the torchlight. A collective gasp of horror erupted from the human ranks. "Abominations!" a purifier shrieked, his voice cracking with fear. "For Lumina!" But Lumina's light seemed dim against the encroaching darkness. The shambling corpses, slow but inexorable, moved to flank the purifiers, their moans like the grinding of ancient stones. Panic began to ripple through the human formation. The wraiths, released from Kaelen's direct command, surged forward, their chilling wails tearing at the purifier's sanity. Men dropped their weapons, clutching their heads, their screams joining the spectral chorus. Kaelen remained at the edge of the fray, his eyes glowing faintly with nascent power. He wasn't a warrior, not yet. He was the conductor of a symphony of death. With each mental command, he directed his forces, exploiting the purifier's terror, their rigid formations crumbling under the onslaught of the unnatural. A skeletal hand plunged a blade into a purifier's chest. A corpse's foul embrace brought another down. The captain, a man of hardened conviction, fought with desperate ferocity, his holy symbol glowing faintly as he cleaved through a skeleton, sending bones scattering. "Stand your ground, brothers. This is a test of faith." But his words were drowned out by the screams of his men. Fear was a contagion more potent than any plague, and Kaelen wielded it with cold precision. He focused his will, drawing on the raw sorrow that still simmered within him, twisting it into a tangible force. A shadow bolt, dark as pitch, erupted from his hand, striking the captain's shield. The holy symbol flickered, then shattered. The captain staggered back, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. The battle was short, brutal, and decisive. The purifiers, trained for combat against banditry or skirmishes with wild beasts, were wholly unprepared for the relentless, unfeeling advance of the undead. They broke, scattering into the woods. But Kaelen's forces were faster, more numerous than they had seemed. One by one, their cries faded. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by the drip of blood onto the earth and the soft, settling dust. Kaelen walked among the fallen, his heart a shard of ice. He saw the faces of men, frozen in terror or defiance, their lives extinguished. He felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction. This was the cost. This was the beginning. "A clean sweep," Anya observed, her spectral form surveying the carnage. "Efficient. Brutal. They will remember this." Kaelen knelt beside the captain, who lay slumped against a petrified tree, his eyes wide, staring blankly at the sky. His hand still clutched the hilt of his sword, stained with the ichor of the undead. Kaelen reached out not to harm, but to take. He carefully removed the crucifix emblem from the captain's shattered shield. Then, using a shard of bone from one of his fallen skeletons, he carved a stark, angular symbol into the captain's forehead, a mark of death, of defiance, of what was to come. "We leave one alive," Kaelen stated, his voice raspy. "To carry the message." Anya nodded. "Wise. Fear is a seed best planted with a witness." They found him huddled beneath a root, shivering violently, his eyes wide with madness. Kaelen merely looked at him, letting the terror fester. "Tell them," Kaelen commanded, his voice unnaturally deep. "Tell Valerius. Tell the Holy Order. The shadow has awoken, and it remembers." He left the survivor to his broken sanity, turning his back on the carnage. The skeletal warriors returned to their silent vigil. The shambling corpses stood motionless, waiting for his next command. The wraiths dissipated into the night air. Kaelen walked to the highest point of the rise, where the moon, a sliver of cold silver, pierced through the cloud cover. He held the shattered crucifix emblem in his hand, its sacred meaning now twisted, desecrated. The symbol carved into the captain's head lingered in his mind. He closed his eyes, picturing his village, his family, the flames. He felt the phantom touch of his mother's hand, the echo of his father's laugh, the innocence of his sister's smile. All gone. All taken by men like those he had just slaughtered. "My family," he whispered, his voice raw with a pain that even death could not dull. "My village. I swear upon the bones of the fallen, upon the whispers of the grave, upon the very essence of Aetheria's silenced heart." He crushed the crucifix emblem in his fist, its fragments biting into his palm. A single drop of blood, dark as pitch, welled up and trickled down his hand. "I will not rest until Valerius and all who share his dogma are brought to their knees. I will scour their light from this world. I will build an army from their forgotten dead. And I will have my vengeance." Anya watched him, her spectral form almost translucent in the moonlight. For the first time, Kaelen felt a tremor of something akin to approval from her, a silent acknowledgement of the terrible power he had just claimed. The oath was spoken. The path was set. Aetheria's shadow had truly begun to stir.